Hi guys. Okay, it's Matt and Irene. I'm
Hello,
Irene.
I'm behind the
camera. Why are you behind the
Why am I
camera?
always behind the
But
camera?
why don't you come over here?
I will in a sec.
Oh, okay. So we are the founders of Parker Thatch, and we have been inspired lately by listening to a lot of stories about other founders and their story. And so for us, I was like, well, you know what? We do a lot of these video chats, but Matt and I never really talk about how we started our company. And we started our company back in 2001, right, Matt?
Yep.
I always get the dates wrong. We're getting really old.
We started in 2001. And
Yes.
then the actual company was 2002, but we started in 2001.
Yes, in Australia at Matt's dad's farm on the kitchen table.
In Byron Bay.
And but we started with something called e-stationery, and it was something that Matt coded, and the concept was to find stationery online.
Yeah,
in
but why? Because
2001.
we had just been dating. How long have we been dating at that point? Less than a year.
Yeah, and Matt was in California.
June. That was that June, and then that was that Christmas, right?
Right, and I was in New York, and Matt knew that I love peonies, and so. And I love handwritten notes, and Matt loves the tradition of that. But we were far away. So Matt's a brilliant jack of all trades, would I say, like knows many things. But he could code, and he's really great at drawing.
But what happened was
my
mom got sick, and my parents were living in Australia. So you and I were in splitting time between San Francisco and New York.
Right.
And then I went down to Australia. Yeah.
So, and then
So we were separated.
Yes.
And we had just been dating for not forever. So
That's
like
true.
I wanted to stay in touch, and this was before video calls and before, cell phones and everything. Yeah. So it was like we wanted a way to quickly stay in touch, but like elevate it beyond email.
This is dial-up time, where it's okay. So, long story short, Matt made a stationery and drew a peony and sent it to me, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool that I could get an email that looks like a handwritten note. So fast forward, we were in Australia, and both of us had quit our jobs, and we were like, well, what do we do? I don't know. We have all these skill sets.
And you came down to join me. Like this was like this was like 6 months down in Australia.
Yes, and we were at the kitchen table, and I was like, well, you know that stationery thing you made me? Do you think you could code it and make it something real that people can actually use? And Matt's like, yeah, I think I could do that. And I was like, cool. Well, my skill sets, I was in fashion. So I was like, well, I can help with the stationery look and feel. And we had this idea, this was so long ago, we had this idea that you could come online and walk through a beautiful virtual shop and pick your design and then have your stationery pop up, and then you could write a beautiful handwritten note and send it. Because at that time, it was a time of, oh my God, it was a time of like e-greetings and crazy clowns and cows, and we didn't want that. So I was like, I just want a beautiful store to go into, like on Madison Avenue, pick my design, and instead of having to have it engraved, I would just have it done online. So anyways, long story short, that concept was really
we were just trying to
wonderful.
we loved Crane stationery. We loved Smythson stationery, right. and we loved using email. But email was super practical and didn't have any of the qualities of those like beautiful stationery. So we were trying to bring some of those qualities to
and give
email.
you that feeling. So long story short, it was way before anybody could even think about this as it was just too far advanced for that time in 2001 or 2.
And plus we made it a subscription model.
We made people pay for it when everything was free. I'm like, why wouldn't you pay for this? So anyways, that didn't really work. So we were like, oh no. And then now fast forward, by the time Matt's building this thing, we were back in California, and the two of us
living at your parents' house.
The two of us who had gone to many schools. I had a crazy, we had a huge career or not huge, but like we just had long careers in whatever we were doing. We're both back in my room that I grew up in my parents' downstairs. And that's where we were, with all of our stuff in the garage. And they were probably like
a suburb of San Francisco.
Yeah, so they're probably like...
And we weren't even married yet, and your parents were so kind. I had all of my stuff
in the garage.
In your parents' garage.
But even when we were in Australia, remember?
Which is pretty like...
Pretty crazy.
That's
But
pretty-
now, we thought it was normal at that time, but it wasn't.
But now that we have kids who are like,
I know, I'm like,
I'm like,
oh my God.
wow, that's really
advanced.
accommodating of your parents. Yeah.
They really liked you, Matt.
Yeah.
So anyways, so we're in the basement. We're like, oh my God, what do we do? What are we doing? I mean, and like I had all my boxes from New York. All the stuff that came back from New York was also in the garage and in my bedroom because my parents were like, okay, you got to stuff all your stuff into your room. So Matt's got a desk. It was the desk that I grew up doing my homework on. And he's like, okay, I'm going to just code this thing from here. And I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. So I don't know. It took a while to do because obviously it was a one-man show coding during that time where it had to take credit. It was very complicated. There was nothing like Shopify where you could just plug things in. Like he had to make his own thing. And you had to make it work, like animate. So long story short.
And the way it would work, because this is not what was happening back then, is that you didn't have to go to some website to read the message. It would
pop
open
up
up
into your
directly
email.
in your email.
It was very advanced, Matt, and you're just really super talented. So long story short, that didn't work out. So Matt and I are two people who are very stubborn. So we were like, okay, well, that didn't work out, but everybody started
Yeah, but you skipped like that. We tried everything to make that work.
Yeah, we tried everything to make it work.
We
Let me
were
just
going
tell
to
you,
flea
let's do a
markets.
couple of things. So I'm like, well, maybe if we put it in a beautiful box with like, and you could buy it and you would get a user code and password and you could sign in. So you could go to your stationery store and buy e-stationery and it was just in a beautiful box. So I had
packaging.
We had no money, right? So we spent all our money going to like this beautiful letterpress person, asking her to make a custom. And our company was named iomoi. Okay, first of all,
We'll get back to that.
what were we thinking with that? Like, couldn't spell it, people couldn't pronounce it, but we liked the fact how it looked. Okay, so and it was like I owe myself. Like, okay, really? Is someone gonna figure that out? Whatever. You just have to laugh. And so we made this beautiful box.
So just fast forward. It took us. We started that in 2002. It
Yeah.
took us. This is to show how stubborn we are and how long. It took us till 2015 to change our name.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But anyway, so it was in a beautiful box, and Matt and I are like going from door to door to like cool stores. We're like, hey, we got this great thing. Like we were so silly. Like we didn't even demo it. We were just explaining it to people. And then I was like, well, let's also try on the weekends, maybe flea markets where, you could get a really, because we had no money. So we're like, let's get a really, inexpensive stand. I mean, you were at the flea market, so why would you want to buy e-stationery? I'm not sure. But then we had to supplement it because we had to pay for the stand. So I started making weird jewelry in addition to it.
Like the hoop earrings, right?
Just to pay for the stand. So of course people bought the jewelry.
But then do you remember when we printed out all of our postcards? We didn't even have them manufactured. We printed out a bunch of postcards and then
walked around our neighborhood.
Walked all the way around our neighborhood here and
put them in
people's mailboxes.
We were doing everything. So none of that was working. Nobody wanted to pay for it except for friends and family because I think they felt sorry for us. But it was so beautiful. But then we started getting people who did sign up write to us like, this is the most beautiful design.
We had a hardcore fan base.
Yes.
Of like several thousand people who were like, we get it and we love what you're doing.
But it wasn't enough at $10 to have even for us to get out of our basement in my parents' house. Like we were still in our parents' house. So anyways.
But we kept the e-stationery going.
We kept it going and people really loved it that could understand it.
10 years?
Yeah, and you know what? The editors were really they thought it was really interesting. We did get some traction, but it just wasn't enough.
I think it was going till like 2012.
Yeah. So.
Because then we made it free.
Yes. So, but long story short, people kept writing in and it's like, can we get this on like actual products? So we're like, okay, fine. We have to do something. Let's just make actual stationery. So then suddenly
but then we also
became.
did personalized versions of the e-stationery for people, remember?
Yes. So suddenly we went from e-stationery becoming a stationery company. So that's how we started making actual tangible goods. And you know what? That started rolling into other things. And
that was within the first few months because we created the e-stationery and then let's say by summer.
Yeah.
And then before the end of the year we already had created.
And I had this concept. So we made stationery, but then I was thinking, I just remember Lucy, what's that show, I Love Lucy? No,
yeah.
no, it was like the two girls, and then she always had a sweater with the letter L on it. What's that like?
Yeah, I think you're talking about I Love Lucy.
No, it wasn't I Love Lucy. It was like
Laverne
Penny,
and Shirley.
Laverne and Shirley. So Laverne also had a sweatshirt with the letter L on it. And I was always like, that's so cool that she has her own little monogram on her sweater. And back then, monogram stationery was only like truly expensive, like engraved or like, it was just like not something that people would just buy. So then I had this idea like, hey, Matt, since we're already printing this stuff out by ourselves,
Because we were
this
doing
actual
folded note cards.
Yes, and let's just mind you, let's just explain how we were doing this. We didn't have enough money to run a print run, so we got printers and we were printing them in our house and folding them. And we didn't even have enough money to get something that was like a tool. What is that thing where it folds? Scoring the stationery. And God bless my parents. They let us stay there and then they helped us. So we were cutting all this stuff by hand with a hand cutter.
Weren't your parents scoring? Like I remember your dad scoring it with
a deodorant stick.
Deodorant stick.
Because we were like, so we would fold it in half and then he would score it with a deodorant stick. And then
we'd fold it over and then use the deodorant stick to like make it really folded really well. Every single card.
Yes. So that's what we did. And then we would box it in these little boxes. I mean, it was just everything was done by hand.
Boxes of 10.
And my poor parents were like making hang tags, like, like gift tags. But, of course, I'm like, ooh, let's make them cute with scallops. So we had like scallop scissors that my dad would scallop all the tags, remember?
By hand.
And then we had this grommet maker thing and it had like a bell on it. So it sounded like a bicycle bell.
Every time.
And my dad would be like, this is remember?
Those were for gift tags, right?
So yeah, and then we would then have to put each gift tag into its own little cello bag. It was very hand labor. So anyways, for like $1 a piece. I don't even know what we were thinking, but
and that's when we got that showroom in San Francisco, remember?
Yes, so we were just doing stationery, and then I was like, okay, if we're doing this already, and I had this constant thing in my head, like the Laverne and Shirley L. So I'm like, Matt, do you think we could just take orders and I could actually put people's initials or monograms on something, on the stationery? And he's like, yeah. So that's what kind of drove like our business, like then we got more people buying the stuff, I remember. And it was Christmas. And Matt and I were honestly printing this stuff, like we were doing this all by hand. And then we had to pack it. And then we had no like money to even have like a stamp system or like a address system. So I was handwriting each person's addresses on a label and physically taking it to the USPS.
I used to go down in my Toyota 1991 white Toyota Corolla wagon.
That's quite a story.
Full of IKEA, those blue IKEA bags.
Oh my God, and they would hate us.
USPS number 4 boxes.
That I had
handwritten
everyone's labels.
And did we put stamps on it? We didn't even have
they had to put stamps on each one, so they hated us.
They did it there.
Yeah, and like we would roll in every night with these giant IKEA bags, and they would roll, like it was almost like Rochambeau who would take these too because they knew what they were getting into. So that was our Christmas.
And wait in line.
Oh yeah, wait in line during Christmas, which was like out the door. So that was our days when we were like, yes, we're doing this. This is awesome. So that's what we were doing. And then, so we started doing stationery shows, and then...
What were we shipping then? Was that website purchases?
Yes, we were shipping custom stationery.
Yeah.
And then, so we did that, and so then we were like, then we started doing other products. So I was really inspired by John Darien. Remember when he had all those paperweights, mm-hmm. and he had these beautiful designs, and I was like, well, maybe we could do an iomoi version of the John Darien paperweights. Why don't we make them with our designs, and they're each customized. So another long story short, the editors were so kind when we were like back then. I think editors for magazines were like if a huge whatchamacallit blogger or a huge Instagrammer would show your stuff, and it was just like that would make your entire Christmas. So Real Simple did this 1-page beautiful spread, and I remember it so distinctly, of the paperweight, and that really just made our Christmas insane. So we had only the two of us and my parents. So there's 4 people. We have a lot of this PR.
I didn't get it all up, but we have a lot going back to,
you should visit our PR page. I wish I should have brought the products out, but anyway, so that Christmas was crazy. Yeah. And we were not very good at, because we weren't making that many, so it wasn't like using machines. It was all done by hand. But the Christmas, it got crazy, like really crazy for 4 people. We couldn't do it. And so Matt Matt, remember you had to go down to the stationery, like there was a place in our little town where it was like a hobby shop. And you could rent their like die cutter. So we could die cut the shapes that would go into the paperweights.
That was down in Danville.
So Matt would spend all day at the die
because we couldn't afford to buy that machine.
That thing that you roll the thing through.
The die cutting machine.
So he would stay there all day.
To rent their machine.
To rent it by the hour and roll those paperweights.
Yeah.
And then you would bring it back. So you were constantly running it back and forth because then we would have to assemble them, right?
Yeah.
And then, so my mom and I and my dad were upset, but then it got so out of hand that the four of us couldn't do it anymore. And we're like, what do we do? It's almost Christmas, right? So then I was like, Mom, the Asian community with friends is really strong around here. So I'm like, Mom, we're going to have to use your Asian posse. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, can I call Mr. and Mrs. Chang and Mr. and Mrs. Liu? And, I could deliver 5 of these, like, boxes of them, and they could assemble it for us. Because that was the only way we could do it.
That was a big deal.
So then we started, like, transporting these things around to the Asian posse in our area, right? We had, like, 4 or 5 couples that were helping us. And then we would go drop them off and then go pick them all up and then pack them.
So we would drop off all of the blanks with the custom inserts.
Yeah, that were already cut, but they had to
assemble
assemble
it.
it.
And pick up the finished part.
Oh my God, it was insane. So, but it was still out of hand. Like then it got like, we didn't know this, but like maybe 2 weeks before Christmas is when everybody starts really shopping. So that was already out of hand for a long time and we couldn't handle it anymore. So then at one point we're like, I think we're going to just shut off our website.
That's right.
Right? So we're like, we're going to have to shut it off.
Only because we couldn't make stuff delivered in time for Christmas.
Right. And so we did shut it off. And then we started getting all these phone calls like, what are you guys, clowns?
That's right.
2 weeks before Christmas and your website doesn't work?
And you were answering every phone call.
What are you, crazy? Or what are you, stupid? And we're like, oh my God, they're calling us stupid, but we just can't do this. So it's just really funny. Anyways, so that was our Christmas. And we're still, so we're on the personalized, paperweight stationery train. Then we're like, okay, let's do a bigger product. And I'm like, let's do a tray. I want to do a tray. Remember? And Matt and I were in New York at the Carlisle. I remember this distinctly. And they have these really cool things in the old Carlisle before it got remodeled, these lucite little stands in the women's bathrooms. And I was like, whoa, these are so
Almost
cool.
like bar carts, right?
Yeah, I was like, I love these so much. Who makes this? Like, I need to know. Because I was thinking it's clear and it's like our paperweights. So then I asked the guy and I was like, where'd you get these at the hotel? Like, where do these things come from? So he said, it's this guy, George, up, in New York somewhere outside. And I was like, cool. So I called George. I was like, hey, George, I saw your cool, your little stands at the Carlisle yesterday in the bathroom. I have this idea, and I was wondering if you make trays. I know you probably do. But back then in the 70s, there were trays that were like trays. They were clear lucite, but they were rounded.
It was like the Furstenberg tray, where it was like a neon color, and it was just a tray.
And they had rounded edges, right? I wanted because I like things very square. Like, as you can see in our bags, personally, my visual is I don't like things too rounded I like things that are very structured. And so I'm like, can you make me a tray that's really clean and square, but I need you to add a piece on top so that we could insert.
That was the innovation.
Right.
There were lots of trays before.
Yeah.
But what nobody had at that time was a custom inlay.
I think you guys have seen this tray everywhere,
insert.
but that was like a real novel thing.
That did not exist before.
No, and so George was like, yeah, I think I can do this for you. And so we tried it, and it was really hard to get the insert, because all these things were already assembled by hand. So it was imperfect, so it was hard to get the insert on an imperfect thing to fit perfectly into. Right.
It was handmade.
So it took a lot of jiggering, and a lot of the lucite was very sticky, so we had to come up with a lot of things where we had to peel that brown paper off, and then it got sticky and things would stick to it.
Remember the first version of it? So there was the tray, and then we're like,
all
right, we're going to put a custom insert,
yes,
and then a protective lucite sheet,
yes, on top.
And then we used little bits of sticky
glue. And my poor dad, again, it's thanks Dad and my
so
mom
it had to
help us do
overlap between the
But not have
inlay
it
and the
show.
bottom part, not show, like it had to be placed like
And
that.
then the best part was also it was static once you pull the thing off. So we had to blow dry it, remember, to take the static out of it. You forgot that
that's
blow drying
right.
part.
I did
so
forget that.
So my dad would blow dry it when we were in the garage.
Oh my god.
So anyway, so that
Then
was
then
crazy.
we innovated and figured out how to.
Yeah, we got smarter. Then we put it on the bottom
Screws.
with the screws.
Yeah.
So that took us in iomoi. So the trays, everything was great. And for us, it was like amazing. We were in Neiman Marcus. We were doing all this stuff.
Trays.
And we're like, this is amazing.
Stationery.
And then one day Matt came to me, and this is how so then everybody started copying those things. And then it was just like, it got a little bit like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? So then, of course, I think we should have patented it, and I think we would be retired.
That tray we should have patented.
But either way, good story. And Matt's like, well,
It's like all along the way, there's, failures. Like I don't call it as a negative, but it's like it's reality. It's like
Yes.
there's these failures where we're like, had we done that, da da da.
Right.
Da.
But the key is-
should the e-stationery have been subscription? No, it should have been free, and then we probably would have got thousands
millions
and thousands
of
of it.
right.
Like,
But no. So I think the failures. I think the key is we didn't let the failures let us give up. For some reason, we're like, we got to keep doing this. This is great. And along the way, we got to meet so many cool people that we would have never met. Like just the coolest people, editors and other builders and other founders along the way. And it was all truly through our designs. We had these great icons. Like this is one of them. I'll show later, like the zebras and the caftans or the cocktail. Like that was our thing, you know. We just wanted to bring happiness and to your house, and like I think having something personalized really makes you feel like, ooh, I'm cool, and I think that's what it was. So then Matt one day, and I'm like, what's our next product? Because everybody's copy this tray. I don't know, you know, what's our next
because
product?
our mindset then was we have all these designs that we can do,
Yes.
and we
What can we
know
do?
that we can do customization.
Right.
What's another platform? Like what's another area where we can apply it?
Right. So Matt and I were like, Matt's like, well, what's the next product? What do you think you want to do? And I'm like, well,
No,
I've always
what happened
wanted
is I figured out that we could apply our stuff to fabric.
to cotton.
Fabric.
Right. So I was like, okay. He's like, I think I could take these designs we have and you can monogram whatever you want to do.
And I mean, people have been doing T-shirts forever. Like when you say
Right.
cotton, it's like, okay, well,
Right.
T-shirts.
Right.
That wasn't innovative. What
No.
was innovative is that
A bag.
I figured out a way to put the design on really heavy canvas.
Right. So Matt's like, well, I could do it on, he's like, this is what I can do. And you need to go figure out what product it is. I can make these designs and put them on to, I was like,
I mean,
a
technically
fabric.
cotton, it is,
Right.
but it's super heavy.
But it would have to be a natural color. I think that's what the key was. So I was like, it can't be dark.
You're right. It had to be
that
a-
was
a light ground.
those were the tools that Matt gave me to use. And I was like,
That's right. It has to be
And
light.
I was like, well, my background honestly is in product development. So, but I had a huge budget to do stuff. So our budget was like $5, honestly. So I'm like, okay, well, all right. Well, natural canvas is probably the only thing I could afford because that was the only thing. And it's tough, and I think it looks really cool. So for me, awesome. We don't have any machines.
And it was light colored.
We don't have any machines. This is one of our, this was actually, I was telling Matt, this isn't even one of the first bags, because this one, it was like the heavier
That one
canvas
came
where
along later,
you
yeah.
could stand to this
We've
one
got to
up.
find one of the old ones.
The-
Your
the old one?
Your mom has the old
Yeah,
one.
the old one is like so floppy it wouldn't even stand up. Right?
And
It was
it
like
has
a
that
limp
rectangle.
handshake. Yes, and so Matt's like, okay, well, what can you do? So I was like, well, I've always wanted a bag that I felt like it had the structure that I like, which is square.
This is 2009 now.
Yes, as you can see. And this is the Mimi bag. So this is the first Mimi bag. It was in 2009. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a designer. I can't draw. All I know is I know how to put things together, and I know what I like when I see it. So I'm like, okay, I like natural canvas because I love the color eggshell. I don't really like white. So that's easy and pretty cheap, and I could get that at the fabric store. And then B, we don't have any machines or anything, but a bag needed to have handles. So I'm like, well, I guess we could use natural leather, and that kind of is cool because it's like Louis Vuitton when you get the strap, bag first. It's really light, and then it gets dark as you use it. And I'm like, all right, well, that we can afford. We could go buy one piece of leather, right?
Yep.
And then Matt's like, all I can do is I could cut them into strips for you.
So we were going to Western Supply, because we were like, where can we find this leather? We were going to like People who made cowboy boots.
Really crazy places.
People who made S&M whips.
Right. Oh my god.
Remember,
Oh my god, yes.
why were we in Oakland? Was that Tassel? Why were we there?
No, it was because, I'll explain that later.
What was that guy doing?
We needed someone to help us cut the leather pieces after a while, because Matt was hand cutting these on this kitchen counter before it was white, okay? It was this gray, nasty colored counter, but it's the same counter because we didn't change we just made it white and painted the bottom. So
that first holiday, 2009, I was banging on this counter.
So I have the mat that you were banging, because we still use it
sometimes.
sometimes.
I know, but before I even figured that out, I was banging on this counter.
Oh yeah, physically on there were holes into the counter.
And then there were permanent holes.
Yes, there were like little holes. So this was the bag I had the idea for. I was like, I want a square bag. I want it to be about this big, you know, because I needed a bag that could fit everything for work, but I needed to have structure. And this is I kind of like came up with all these things that I loved and put it together. But then I'm like, I can't make a pattern. I don't know how to do. I'm not trained to do this. I just know what I like, and you know, I always worked with designers who could do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, well, Matt, we can't afford a real pattern maker. We can't afford a factory to do any of this stuff. But I did notice one thing. My favorite cleaners down the street had this woman who she was like in her 20s, and she was helping her mom and dad run this cleaning place. And
this is where we would take. When we were
all my dry cleaning would go there.
We would take our dry cleaning there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really short, so every pair of pants I got.
And then when I had to get my pants hemmed, I would go there.
Right. So, but me personally, my pants, I'm really short. So every pair of pants, I have to get them hemmed. But working in fashion, there's a way that pants are hemmed where it was a slight way of just hemming your pants where it just gave you that break where you're like, that feels good. And it's hard. And we were spoiled in New York where we had our tailors that would do that. And I noticed when she would hem my pants, she would do that. And I'm like, she's actually technically really, really good. So then one day I asked her, I was like, what's your background?
And she had a degree on the wall.
She had a tiny degree on the wall. And she's like, yes, I went to the San Francisco Fashion Institute, but now I have to help my parents. And I was like, oh, that sucks. But okay. But note to self that she's actually really technically great at what she does, and she has a good eye. So then I went to her at the dry cleaners, okay? This is dry cleaners in San Ramon, and it's still there, right? Mm-hmm. We should go visit her. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, hey, listen.
They moved like 3 doors down.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm like, hey, listen, I have a project, and I was wondering if you'd help me out. I know you could make a pattern, and I'm wondering if you could help me make this. And she's like, okay, sure. So I took all the things I wanted, like the shape, the measurements, what I wanted it to look like, and I said, can you try to construct this with this half a yard of fabric that we had to buy at Joann's Fabric? Remember?
Yeah, and she didn't have like a step-foot sewing machine.
No, she had like a normal sewing machine, right? And so that canvas, even though it was pretty light, was pretty heavy for her to sew. Mm-hmm. But she had to make the pattern first. So after a couple times, she made it, and I was like, okay, that's perfect. This is it. So this is the shape, and it was this shape. This is the bag. It wasn't changed at all. This is a bag, and it's just not as fancy as our bags now.
Tweaked and everything.
Right, but this is a bag. And, you know, I was so technically not even sound that I didn't want really long handles, but as you can see, this doesn't even go over your shoulders. Like, this is crazy. Like, who made a bag like this? Right? Yeah. You could only carry it by hand, but it wasn't like you could put it over your shoulders because I didn't think about it. I was just thinking aesthetically, I didn't want these long handles, but I should have had the long handles you could go, whatever. No, so it was
we
fine.
Tried that later.
Right. So this is fine. So this was the original, and it was a little bit too fat, but whatever. So this is the way it was. And then it had 8 rivets because this is the only way we could attach the handles to the bag because we had no machines. So Matt's like, all right, fine. This is all you can. He gave me this is what I can do, and then you got to go figure it out to see how you can make it aesthetically pleasing. And I'm like, okay. So then we got the bag, and then we assembled it, and Matt figured out showed me how to, you know, like how he could print it. And we're like, this is cool. So we sent it out, I remember, in August to all the gift guides, to all the editors in New York. And we were sitting around like, waiting for them to, like, this is it. This is our big break, if we could get this, right? And every single magazine called us back. They're like, can you send more of this? We know we like the design. Are there other? So it had stripes.
Because it's not like, I mean, we didn't invent the idea of putting custom design on
No,
bags.
no, but it had our icons and stripes.
Honestly, the only people who were really doing that
Was Goyard,
were
really at that
super
time.
high-end, like,
Yeah,
people,
with the stripes, right?
It was hand painted.
Right. So, and it was cool somehow.
Or it was, plenty of places did like embroidery. Like
right. But it wasn't
shop.
like this, where it was like, we sent out icons and stripes, and every magazine called us back and they were like, we want to do this for a gift guide. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane. This is awesome. And so we're like, okay, well, how are we going to make these, right? So we didn't have money to make these bags. So Matt and I were like, okay, well, we're just going to have to do what we were doing. So I remember for Joann's Fabrics.
And by that, you mean like, it's not like we could do a factory run where we're like, here, make
absolutely
200
not.
bags.
No.
We had to onesie, twosie.
Right. So then I was like, well, this is what we can do, Matt. I know you get 50% off coupons at Joann's, and you could use them once a day, one person a day. So Matt and I would go and get all the bolts of like we would buy them by the bolt, right? And both of us would stand in line every day and go through the Joann's and give them that 50% coupon, come home, and we started stockpiling canvas, right? And then what happened was then our dry cleaning girl, that really nice woman, we're like, can you sew 25 of these? I remember, right? And she was like, that's a lot for her. And we started stressing her out a lot. But it got us through that Christmas, and it was really done through standing in line at Joann's, and the first batch of bags were really done through the dry cleaners. Mm-hmm. And then
I had to put every design on and punch holes and put every handle on, hammer it on.
And then we'll show you guys this. So this is the inception of the bag. So this is the bag that we had. And I remember the most exciting thing for me was I'm the biggest Sofia Coppola fan. And I remember her assistant emailed us and was like, Sofia really wants this bag. She loves it, but she just wants her initials in yellow, just on the bottom right-hand corner letters. That's all. And I'm like, nothing else? And she's like, nope, just that. So I thought that was the most exciting. And then I got a handwritten note back from her saying, thank you very much. I love this bag. And I was like, oh my God. That was like the biggest thing for me. I was like, oh my God, Sofia Coppola loves this bag. So this is the Mimi bag. And this is the story of the Mimi bag, which is still our most popular bag now in 2021. But as you can see, it's had many lives. And you can see it comes in 3 sizes now.
We still have that available online.
The original. And Matt is going to, just to go back in time, we're going to do a really cool original stamp on this bag because we want people to carry the original bag. As you can see, there's millions of these bags out there, just like the trays, but we're going to put a Parker Thatch stamp in there. So when you do buy this bag, you know this is the OG bag, and this is the original bag, and that's the real bag.
How the LL Bean tote is the original.
Yeah, it's the original. This is the original where you're like, I've seen that bag somewhere, but that's the original. And this one still has the iomoi logo on it. So anyway, so that now has transformed into 3 sizes in small, medium, and there's a large. As you can see, these are my own personal bags. So this is the leopard. This is the suede, which is our most popular. And then we just had this, which I just brought home, which is in the quilted leather. So it comes in camo. It comes in all sorts of different colors and different configurations, but it's always, you know what I always say, it's made out of a roll of canvas, 2 strips of leather, and 8 rivets. And that's our story. And there's so many battle stories, but I think for us, this is the story of this bag. And Matt and I have now come to a place where we really honestly feel like with every bag that goes out, how we want you to feel when you carry this bag is just feeling the swagger in this bag. Because I find that when you put this bag on, it should make you feel good. And when you feel good, you get the swagger.
And that's the energy we're putting into each of these.
Yeah, and I think that's our mission and our goal. And I really do feel like that's where we've come from. It's been a long journey. It's not done yet, but I think it's just like, I think once you get to understand how this bag came to be and our story and what we fight every day and, you know, things that we go through daily, which we share on our videos, I think it gives meaning to this bag. And one more last thing is, why is it called Mimi? Well, this was always called the original tote. The original classic was what we called it for the longest time.
Classic tote.
And what we noticed was in the stores and online, the most monogrammed item, the most asked for monogram was always Mimi. And so we were like, well, you know what? Maybe this bag should be called a Mimi, because Mimi is usually for a grandmother or somebody that you really love. And it's always a nickname for someone you really, really love. So we're like, well, maybe the bag, and that's why it's called a Mimi bag, because it should be something that you really, really love. And you just want to fix it when it gets old. And you know what? I have seen so many of the original bags, and I think what we need to do is start posting them where they're just beaten up. They've been washed. They've been dry cleaned like a million times. When we first did this, remember, we didn't know that we had to really cleanly cut the art. So after use for a time, you would get this gray square. And I'm like, but the best part was people who got them and they got the gray square. They're like, I don't care. I love this bag so much. Yeah. So anyways, it was, and then I would have to share.
Now though, like we've really just through what, 11 years, right? We've really honed in on the silhouette, the design, the core bag, and now it's all about the details and imbuing each special new one with special energy and special swagger giving capabilities. That's what we're really focusing on.
Yes. So I think that's the bag, and this is the Mimi bag, and this is the story behind the Mimi bag. There are so many stories that we can share, but I would have to say this one came from our garage back in Danville, and the story is just honestly crazy, but great. I think.
It's still going.
It's still going, and that's that. And then another insane.
There's so many other stories.
So many stories.
We have to tell like the trade show stories. We have to tell the Saks Fifth Avenue stories. We have to.
But I think one of the best stories, honestly, is one Christmas, because back then I would go through all the orders myself. And I would look at where they were going, who ordered them. If there were people that we, liked, I would that were our friends. I would always write a note to them. And so there's one day when I saw an order, and it came in, and it was a big order, and I was like, "It's a big order, and it's going to Madison. It's going on Madison. It's going to Park Avenue." And I was like, "Oh my God!"
For us, like the zip code 10021 was always like a special zip code.
I know.
We always look at those.
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh my God!"
10021, like.
Big order.
70th and Madison. We're like, what's up?
And then I see Kate Brosnahan, and I'm like, oh my God, I think that's Kate Spade. And I remember
this was like 2011.
I remember I was on the floor here because I was going through the orders on the floor. I don't know why, and I just remember I was like, oh my God, I think this is Kate Spade. Remember? And I was like, Matt, I think this is Kate Spade who ordered this bag, and it was like, and it was the most exciting thing that ever. It was so exciting to me because it was like someone that I admired so much.
She and Andy, her husband, like they're idols for us. Like they're part of the inspiration of why we did what we started even doing.
And another time we will share how they inspired us to change our names. So
yeah, because all this time we're still at iomoi, and even our best customers couldn't even remember how the name or how to spell.
Yeah, we'll share. I think the name change has to be one of our stores. I know, we're just stubborn.
We kept that.
It was so silly.
Seriously, what? 13 years?
Until Andy told us, hey guys,
Andy,
I think what's up.
Like a huge part of what he does is advertising and marketing. So it's like, you're not going to listen to this guy. You're a real fool.
So long story short, from making this bag and then Katie seeing it,
that's
Matt and I,
that we just discussed.
yes, but we'll talk about that later. But I did find a really great friend. And
also, I think the reason that we're sharing this origin story and our ongoing story is that we have found so much support and help, because there's a lot of times when you're like, this is enough. All right, uncle, like enough.
Good.
Right?
It's good. I'm good.
Yeah, and we've gotten inspiration, honestly, and energy to keep on going, and from hearing other people's stories.
Yes, and you know what? And through the bags and through our Instagram, I can't believe the amount of amazing people and friends we've met. And just like daily, we have this core group of Parker Thatch friends that we talk to each other online. We haven't even met each other, but it's just amazing. And it's connected through this bag that we put out there daily. And I think that's just, thank you for seeing this bag and loving this bag and supporting us. And I think it's just like, and that's why we want to share our story, because I think it's just really special. So that's the energy we want to put out there. And I just hope everyone, when they put that bag on their back or on their shoulders, that you find your swagger. And that's all I really, truly would love. Right, Matt?
That's it.
All right. Well, see you guys later. And I don't know, this has probably gone on for an hour, but we'll talk more. Okay. Bye, guys.